whether and how they can celebrate Thanksgiving. The U.S. recorded more than 1 million new cases this past week alone, including 156,416 on Saturday itself, which marked the 11th day in a row that the United States recorded more than 100,000 daily cases. And more than a dozen states all broke daily records of cases on Saturday. Georgia was the only state in the country to see a decrease in the cases over the past 14 days. And as you're polishing off the last of the leftover Halloween candy, authorities are dealing with that surge in coronavirus cases that they believe is linked to the spooky holiday. Prior to Halloween, the CDC warned that many activities can be high risk for spreading the virus, including trick-or-treating, costume parties, and haunted houses. However, many people ignored the warnings and went ahead with gatherings and small-scale events, which officials say are contributing to the spike in COVID-19 numbers nationwide. Moderna Inc. has said today its experimental vaccine was 94.5% effective in preventing COVID-19 based on interim data from a late-stage clinical trial, becoming the second U.S. company in a week to report results that far exceed expectations. Together with Pfizer Inc.'s vaccine, also shown to be more than 90% effective, and pending more safety data and regulatory review, the United States could have two vaccines authorized for emergency use only. Europe's health regulator said it had started a real-time review of Moderna Inc.'s experimental vaccine on the back of similar such review launches for vaccines from AstraZeneca and Pfizer. Concerns over vaccine storage and distribution amid unprecedented global demand are weighing on the anticipation of these vaccines, even as companies prepare to fulfill commitments. Johnson & Johnson launched a new large-scale late-stage trial today to test a two-dose regimen of its experimental COVID-19 vaccine and evaluate potential incremental benefits for the duration of protection with the second dose. Britain's health minister has said that even if progress with the COVID-19 vaccines is made as quickly as possible, majority of the people will not be vaccinated until next year. If the vaccinations are rolled out widely, life could return to normal only by next winter. Russia expects to produce primarily freeze-dried Sputnik coronavirus vaccine doses by the spring. It is easier for coronavirus to spread indoors than outdoors as people stay inside their homes during winter, which is a perfect setup for the contagion, according to Dr. Vivek Murthy, the top Indian-American advisor to President-elect Joe Biden on COVID-19. Joe Biden's scientific advisors will be meeting with vaccine makers in the coming days as the presidential transition remains stalled because President Trump's refusal to acknowledge that he lost the election. He worked to take back an apparent acknowledgement that Joe Biden won the White House and was making clear he would keep trying to overturn the election results. His earlier comments yesterday had given some critics and supporters hope that the White House was ready to begin work on a transition with Biden's team. Not so fast, Trump soon assured. President Trump's campaign is withdrawing a central part of its lawsuit seeking to stop the certification of the election results in Pennsylvania, where Joe Biden beat Trump to capture the state and help win the White House. SpaceX launched 4 astronauts to the International Space Station yesterday in the first full-fledged taxi flight for NASA by a private company. The Falcon rocket thundered into the night from the Kennedy Space Center with 3 Americans and 1 Japanese, the second crew to be launched by SpaceX. The Dragon capsule on top, named Resilience by its crew in light of this year's many challenges, most notably COVID-19, reached orbit 9 minutes later, due to reach the space station late today and remain there until spring. A fast-strengthening Hurricane Iota became a very dangerous Category 4 storm as it swept over the Western Caribbean early this morning, approaching the same part of Central America battered by a similarly powerful Hurricane Eta just over a week ago. And Catholic bishops of the United States open a national meeting today under dramatic circumstances. A pandemic has compelled them to meet virtually from their far-flung dioceses, and a hard-fought presidential election has caused sharp divisions in their own ranks. And 6 days before the meeting, the Vatican released a revelatory report detailing how clerics in the U.S. and abroad failed to hold an ex-cardinal for many years after suspicions of serial sexual misconduct had become widespread. Peru's interim president has resigned a day after 2 people died during protests against his government. And the United States and Israel worked together to track and kill a senior al-Qaeda operative in Iran. Earlier this year, a bold intelligence operation by the 2 allied nations that came as the Trump administration was ramping up pressure on Tehran. Meanwhile, Iran reported a record over 13,000 new coronavirus infections and 486 deaths over the past 24 hours, as the government planned tougher restrictions to curb the pandemic in the Middle East's worst affected country. Azerbaijan postponed taking control of a territory ceded by Armenian forces in a ceasefire agreement Turkey's government submitted a motion to parliament seeking its approval to deploy peacekeepers to monitor a ceasefire agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Turkish President Erdogan has said he favors a permanent division of Cyprus into two states. And gunmen in western Ethiopia, meanwhile, killed at least 34 people in an attack on a bus. The national human rights body there reporting as fears grow of a security vacuum in the country amid a military campaign in the north. And the 12-day conflict between Ethiopia's government and the forces of the country's Tigray region has escalated. Libya's rival sides wrapped up a week of UN-brokered talks without agreeing on a transitional government that would lead the country to an election in December of next year. And when the United Arab Emirates normalized relations with Israel, the Palestinians had decried the move as a betrayal of both Jerusalem, where they hope to establish the capital of their future state, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, the city's holiest Muslim site. But with Israel now courting wealthy Gulf tourists and establishing new air links to the major travel hubs of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, Palestinians in East Jerusalem could soon see a tourism boon after the months in which the coronavirus transformed the holy city into a ghost town. A human rights group in Belarus has said more than 900 people were arrested in protests around the country, calling for authoritarian president there to step down. And UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was hospitalized in the spring for the coronavirus, is again self-isolating after he was exposed to a member of parliament who contracted the virus. The UK's chief negotiator has warned we may not succeed in securing a Brexit trade deal as he made a surprise arrival in Brussels today for renewed talks. Britain's Prince Charles said bonds between his country and Germany would remain strong as he visited Berlin against a backdrop of increasingly tense Brexit talks. And Germans should brace for another 4 to 5 months of severe measures to halt the rise in coronavirus infections and should not expect the current rules to be eased quickly. In this news out of Frankfurt, as the Czech Republic, one of the worst hit countries in Europe amid the wave of the coronavirus pandemic, reported over 1,800 new cases yesterday. And the Philippines Health Ministry recording over 1,700 new coronavirus infections and 7 additional deaths as New Zealand make the masks mandatory for users of public transport in Auckland as well as on all domestic flights. South Korea reporting more than 200 new coronavirus cases for the third consecutive day today, and Russia reporting a record over 22,000 new daily coronavirus cases today. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Radio Caravan. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be participating in the 12th BRICS summit hosted by Russia on the 17th of this month. Warships of 4 major Indo-Pacific democracies, the United States, Japan, Australia and India, will maneuver together in the Malabar naval exercise off the Goa coast tomorrow. And this is the second round of the war games by the Quad countries over the last month that marks the evolution of the informal Quad partnership into a potential strategic alliance. 15 Asia-Pacific countries yesterday signed the world's biggest free trade deal, seen as a huge coup for China in extending its influence. India has committed a strategic blunder and missed the bus to long-term growth, said Chinese state media about New Delhi's decision not to join that China-led 15-country regional comprehensive economic partnership signed yesterday at an online ceremony hosted by this year's ASEAN chair, Vietnam. Nearly 2 lakh Indian students chose the United States as their destination to pursue higher education in 2019-20. They comprised nearly 20% of the over 1 million students from around the world. And India continued with its unbroken trend of daily new recoveries, surpassing the daily new infections for the 44th consecutive day today. Over 43,000 recovered in the past 24 hours, as against 30,000 new cases of the viral infection were reported from across the country. Delhi's health minister said that the coronavirus infection peak has passed in the national capital and that there will be no reimposition of lockdown in Delhi. The Aam Aadmi Party launched the second phase of Red Light On, Gadi Off campaign in the national capital. And with no respite in the rising COVID-19 cases across the country, the centre has taken a cautious approach and likely to decide against holding a parliament winter session this year. With the Maharashtra government allowing the reopening of religious places, the Sai Baba temple in Shirdi is set to welcome devotees from today after 7 months of closure. JDU President Nitish Kumar has taken the oath as Bihar's chief minister for the 4th consecutive time, his 7th stint overall as the state's chief minister. Afghanistan has joined India in dismissing Pakistan's so-called dossier on external forces sponsoring terrorism, with Kabul saying Islamabad should allow a UN-appointed delegation to verify the claims ahead of Prime Minister Imran Khan's visit to Kabul this week. Pakistan's recorded its highest number of COVID-19 infections since July on each of the last 4 days as the second wave of the epidemic gathered momentum. Prime Minister Imran Khan will preside over a meeting of the National Coordination Committee to devise a strategy to deal with the rising numbers in the country, as over 2,400 new cases were reported yesterday. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the